Good evening. Hello everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to the, final part of the dual celebration, shall we say. This is the celebration of our latest release on Emergent Properties Snafu. You can hear my remix in the background right now. We're going to jump into that any second now. Of course, recently we were joined by none other than the incredible Guy Barone. Massive thanks to Guy for his insane remix. That makes it an incredible package and our biggest release on Emergent Properties to date. If you're not familiar with what we do here at MYT, we're an artist development platform and we run a record label that is designed to combine the biggest names in electronic music with emerging talent. That's literally why it's called Emergent Properties, because that could be you as an artist who works with us as one of our artist development programs, coming up through the ranks and getting feedback on the tracks that you are working on, getting your brand right, getting everything that you need to become a modern electronic music artist in the right way, and then be able to have your stuff remixed by some of the biggest names in electronic music, and vice versa as well. We have very big plans for the label, and as you can hear in the background, this incredible record came to us by one of our members, one of our long-term members, Mr. Dave Curran, under his name Born Of Blades. This is actually his debut release, believe it or not. So his debut release is this huge breakbeat track with Guy Barone on a remix. Just couldn't get any better than that, really. And as you can hear in the background, I'm kind of just throwing the kitchen sink at stuff here. I mean, why not, right? I mean, that's what I do, right? So yeah, I did a remix as well, because as soon as I heard it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to remix this, I'm going to have to sign it. So sometimes in our track feedback sessions that we do for members only, you got a taste of that last week when we had Progressive House royalty in the building. We had Cass, he of Cass and Slide and Perception and everything else. Incredible feedback session. That is on the channel as well. You can watch that back as well. And yeah, essentially, you know, we had an amazing time with him. And then obviously as part of these feedback sessions, sometimes we give you feedback to improve the track. Sometimes we give you a contract. So again, an amazing part of being part of MYT is this label, which we've been running now for basically 2 years. And it was forced upon us by the fact that people are so good within our community that we decided we had to start a record label. They kind of forced me into it. So yeah. So as you can hear in the background, this is my remix of Snafu. Like I say, it's the celebration of this wonderful release, but it's also the celebration of our 6th birthday. We're coming to the end of that celebration. Got some news for you in the next 24 hours about what's going on with the near future. And well, we've been 50% off all month. So again, if you're ever thinking about joining, then and taking your music career really seriously with world-class coaching, world-class social media and branding expertise with the very, very best in electronic music, now's your time, and it's 50% off until, well, Wednesday. We may have 1 or 2 little surprises for you on that one as well, because we do like to give a lot of value here at MYT Towers. So, as you can hear, as I say, here is my Hello. I've just realised I'm muted. Sorry about that. As I moved over, and basically my setting for Ecamm was on the thing there. So sorry about that. A little bit of a mute. So as you can hear, my remixes are in the background. You got a nice little thing in the background there. Nice little preview of it. Yeah, I was checking my levels before Abraham Clark and accidentally muted myself before I went live. Says me right for being so prepared and stuff. Good job I caught that. Would have been embarrassing. So yeah, you got a nice little preview of the outro of the remix there. So as I was saying before, I was so rudely muted by myself. Basically, I converted this from a breaks track, which is the original from Dave, into a 4/4 track. A little bit of electro in there in the middle, you probably heard. Guy Barone did the same. So there's a lot to talk about with that. So I'm going to start by talking about the original track, and I'm going to start talking about some of the parts that are in this. Because essentially, Dave did some amazing work on this track. Like the layering that I've seen in his parts were absolutely sensationally good. Like some of the best I've actually ever seen in a track of any description, to be quite honest with you. Just amazing. So that actually presented something of a challenge because there was so much good stuff to use. I wasn't really sure where to start. So actually what I did was both pick through very specific elements of the original that I wanted to use, but then used groups of stems en masse, because Dave also provided not just the individual layers of certain synths, but the actual like grouped parts as well. So I basically decided to zoom out and kind of just work with almost the original arrangement of the track, really, to try and make it simple. You might be looking at this and thinking, well, that looks devastatingly simple. And it is, because I tried to keep it really simple. And I think if you want to do big records, if you want to do big club records like this that really destroy on the dance floor, you really do need to keep it incredibly simple. You need to keep it very much dialed back, absolute minimum amount of layers that you can get away with, and then really focus in on the impact. And that's kind of what I tried to do here. So where the groove really started for me, and I'm just going to highlight this particular track here, this yellow one here, is one of the original sounds, essentially. So what I've got here is I've got something in a sampler. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open that up in the browser, and you'll be able to see some of the elements here. And basically what I've done, and I'll go through exactly what I've kind of done here with all of this stuff. I've basically put this into a simpler because I wanted to be able to do a couple of very specific elements to it. So I've used a simpler and I've fired it off using MIDI, as you can see here. And it's essentially like it's a 4-bar loop. Now, why did I do that? Well, because I wanted to use one of the tricks that I'm kind of known for, which is this like kind of stutter that I do with the Warp engine, where I rhythmically stutter using the beats mode and then certain envelopes to basically make sure that it's like a 16th note, granular level kind of like gate, if you will. So if I was to dial this up to 100 here, I'm going to explain all of this in a moment. I'm just going to zoom in on that as well, just so we can see it a little bit better. So let me just do that for a starting point. There we go. What I've got here is something like, you know, as I say, this loop in, and it's at 100 on this Holt sampler transformer. That is from our good friend Holt, who has an amazing course on the platform that we would highly recommend you take. Incredible talent, incredible man. And yeah, basically what we're going to do here, as I fire up my MIDI, there we go, play that a little bit low, turn that up a bit, there we go. And you can see that just playing all the way through. And you can hear like there's a bit of, you know, side chaining going on, which I'll just turn off. There you go. That's literally the stem for 4 bars. So what I've done here is I've used this simpler and I've employed this Holt sampler. Now, if I pull this back, what it's doing is it's automating this envelope mode here. So I've got the preserve set to 16ths. I've got the mode set to playing only a 16th note forwards only, and then passes on to the next one. So again, like when the warp engine's working within Ableton, it'll chop everything into smaller chunks, especially when it's in this beat mode. So this gives you a very clear kind of stutter. So when the envelope's at 100, it will play 100% of this decay or this glitch, if you will, or this sample as part of the audio file. And then if I pull that back as I play, I can pull that back to basically just like a click if I want to. So it's a really nice effect, and it's something that on the audio file level within Ableton is not something that you can automate. So Holt, actually being the brilliant guy that he is, made this little Max for Live plugin, which gives you access to this section of the sampler to be able to actually automate it, which is fantastic. And then you can map that to a macro, and then when you map that to a macro, it then becomes automatable on whatever MIDI controller you're using. Me, I dance between mostly these days an APC40 Mark II from Akai. I've also got a Push 2 in the back there. I've got a complete control keyboard. I've got some iPad stuff that I use as well, which I've custom designed. But this is really cool. So I really love using this. And this is an interesting one for me, because normally if you watch my other track breakdowns that are on the channel, you know, from a few years back when I did my EP on Bedrock, when I made various tracks, you'll see that I make a lot of automation in tracks. I'm a big believer in it. It actually really helps, like, you know, enliven the track and make things really, really, you know, alive, and the elements can talk to one another, and it adds this really human performed, very dynamic quality. This actually, believe it or not, if I hit A on the keyboard here, as you can see, part of it here as I'm still zoomed in, like this is pretty much like the only track that I've got automation on in the entire track, like in terms of this style of automation. Normally I've got stuff flying everywhere. In this case, I don't really, you know, I kept it really, really simple, and this really breathes alongside the groove. So if I play that section, or a section of it, up until when the bass drops here, which we'll talk about in a moment, you'll be able to hear exactly what I mean, and you'll be able to see it. Turn it up a little bit so you can hear a bit more. And then back. So I can use it to create like a rise and fall, very implied, you know, longer decays, if you will, for each of those 16th note stutters. And it works really, really well. And again, just to add a little bit of additional groove, as I zoom out here, what you'll see is I've got just a little bit of a high pass filter here at about 153 hertz. That just keeps everything nice and clean for the low end. And then adding our good and eternal friend, the kickstart. Yes, I'm still using Kickstart 1 after all these years. Oh dear. But you know what? Still my most used plugin. So yeah, just little things like that will, you know, really, really contribute, and you'll hear that in the final thing, the final result. And apart from that, that's absolutely got nothing on it at all, because that's like a summation of a lot of like parts from the track put together in a group that Dave provided me with. So I had the opportunity to either play with the original parts on a layer by layer basis or use the groups. So to save a bit of time and a bit of complication, I decided to work on like the group level. And then in a couple of cases like this bass sound right here, that we're going to talk about in a moment from the original part of the track, I've kind of resequenced stuff in order to make it work a little bit better for this remix. So I'm actually almost like resampling parts of the remix from the original in order to make it work in the context of the remix. So it's all this type of stuff. And one of the things I want to show you just quickly before we go on is that I've got 2 sessions for this. So I actually loaded into a separate Ableton session the stems. So as you can see here on the left-hand side in Ableton's browser, which I'll just zoom into now, you can see that I've actually got like over 60 stems at total to be able to pick with. So, and again, like your 64, stems is a lot to work with on an individual singular remix. So again, because I wanted to take the essence of what made the original so good, I wanted to take the parts that I thought would be most amenable to being reframed into a big, direct 4/4 dance floor progressive banger, which I'm sure you'd agree this is exactly what it is. So yeah, I've got the ability to just work on such an individually detailed level. And it was really actually much easier for me because I wanted to retain the essence and the sound of what the original was like, and then add on top of it. It was easier for me to work with stuff at the group level, in the summed level of stems, as Dave put them here. So yeah, I put this session together because I wanted to very easily be able to just sort of pour through each individual stem within the context of this Ableton session, which is actually like an adaptation of my template. So when I do remixes, I like to make a separate session with just the stems in, and then I can decide which of the stems I want to bring into my production template, and then which ones I'm going to get rid of. And it just makes the actual template that I'm going to make the remix from, it just keeps it cleaner. It doesn't feel as cluttered. It's just easier for me to have stuff here and be able to go through it and be able to kind of dial through fairly quickly, and then be able to just drag channels in with the stems already loaded. So that's something that I like to do. And again, because you've got everything in and you've manicured everything, you've got made sure everything's warped correctly, you've made sure that the original tempos are right, everything's starting the same, you've got that element to work with. So I know some remix packs are slightly different, and some people give like little loops and MIDI files and stuff like that. I like to work on this level. I like to work with complete control and complete command of every single stem or groups. It gives me ultimate creative freedom. So again, any aspiring or budding remixers out there, I personally would recommend looking into trying to get the full pack of stems from the label, so you can actually like remix in a much fuller capacity and with a lot more freedom and a lot more choice and control. So that would be my recommendation to you. So we're going to talk bass now before we get into the drums, because the drums are like a big part of it. So again, the original kind of like stuttered part you've just heard here, that was like my starting point, really, because it just had this atmosphere, it had this groove, it had a bit of motion to it. And then the bass, the next one that kind of came in was the bass. So we have this. And just having that held like with a nice tense voice. So I've kind of chopped this to make sure it's working right, and then re-edited this. So you get that lovely interjection at the end, and I've used it very deliberately a couple of times. One here, where there's this lovely build from this mini break into the drop at bar 49. And it just really, announces that, right, the bass is coming, in, a bar's time. Then later on in the track, and I'm going to talk about the breakdown and stuff, because it's a bit of a mad one, because it basically is me sort of, without, going too far into it. It was just me saying, like, Jesus, take the wheel, because Dave's breakdown is so good. I didn't really need to do much. I really just needed to allow it to showcase itself, and then just try and figure out a way of like building it properly and dropping it properly for maximum impact. So a lot of the time in remixing, you're very tempted, and Guy Barone did this with his remix, where it was pretty unrecognizable to the original, and that was a great thing. That was a really, really good thing, because he's created something so deep and with so much like depth in the sound and intensity and atmospherics, and like it's a true progressive record. That liberated me in a way to just make an absolute scorched earth dance floor banger. So I wanted to be able to do something different to Guy, but do it obviously in my own way and with my own sound, which of course I've got, but it's placing those original parts in a different context and in a different use case. That's where I think the best remixes come from. Oftentimes, and you know, I mean this is all the greatest respect to people who do ask me to make remixes. A lot of the time, they're asking me to make remixes of tracks that are quite similar to my production style. So I tend to kind of shy away from that a little bit, because I feel like there's nothing really new I could offer. Whereas something like this, which has breakbeats and all these interesting sounds and everything else, I can take those elements and I can put them, you know, on a, as I like to say, like a Paul James Nolan coat hanger, to say like, hi, well, this is exactly what I do. And by the way, here's this completely retextualized or recontextualized into a completely new genre. I've swapped it from breaks into 4/4. That's what I love. You know, my rules for remixing are mostly great vocals or excellent, you know, atmospherics or excellent sounds, and also from a genre that's not quite mine, because I can actually then remix it into something new. So yeah, so that was what the breakdown is about, and we'll get to that later on. So again, as you heard the build before, like you'll get that bass now as a introductory sound. So there you go. So this kind of bass stab is just absolutely fantastic, and I've used it liberally through the track just to kind of like give it that extra bit of aggression and edge. Then underneath that comes one of my favorites. One of my favorites. The Trillion. The warm and deep Moog Voyager. And all it was just to do something that has a contrast to this bass, but then do something in a way that is slightly different rhythmically. So where you've got these lovely held basses with then like one bar of just like big stabby attack, what I've done here is gone a bit more down a rhythmical kind of pluckier route. So we'll hear that now. So super simple. Doesn't need to be too complex. A little bit of delay that you can hear in the background, which we'll address in a moment. And then that downward drop as that bass stab goes into its lower register. So we'll play that together towards where that stab happens again. And you can hear how the two layer really nicely and work together. Where one is held, the other is plucky. Where one is held, the other one is rhythmical. So it works really nicely. And then all that is in terms of the delay, you could use the delay, say for example, from Trillion. It's very nice. I chose a different option on this occasion though. Because this is my template. One of the things you probably can't see here behind my camera is my send and return. So I'm going to flip into the arrangement view for a second. And you can see my return channels here. I have literally 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. And these are just set up at all times, essentially. So what I do is I have these just on call in my template, and then once I've got get a sound, I play around with different send effects, and it just gives me different looks and gives me different feels and stuff like that. And I've got a couple of delays here. I've got the Ableton Echo, which has got one particular set of sounds to it. And then the other one, which is one of my favourites from good old Sound Toys, is Echo Boy Jr. And the Echo Boy Jr. is really, really nice in that it's very simple. It's actually not the most expensive plugin. I think they gave this away for free a while ago. And it's just got a nice sound to it, and it's very immediate, and I can just set it up, and I've got it in this Plex mode, and it just dances on the 8th note dotted in a ping-pong fashion. It just dances around it really nice. Just, what else do you need from a delay? You got a low cut, high cut, different feelings and different sounds. You got the right kind of echo time controls, bit of feedback. Maybe you want to saturate it a little bit. Done. So that just adds complexity to the sound. And if I was to mute that, you can just hear it's really not that interesting. All of a sudden, that delay just gives it a complexity and a rhythm, and it actually helps it settle next to that more held, like, vocal, sort of wheezy bass with the big thunderous stabs. So that was the bass for the track, really, and just, again, keeping it really, really simple. No big subs or anything like that. Nothing really too complicated. So there's your bass. Then we get into the drums. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, the drums didn't even look this complex until I had to go into the mixdown phase, because we're going to talk about that shortly, because you're going to see or get a little bit of a preview of my mixdown process of what I do at the end of productions. I don't mix in Ableton. I, to this day, will mix in Logic, and I'll talk about how that happens later on. Once we get through the actual production breakdown, I could do an entire class just on my mixdown process. In fact, I've done an entire course on the mixdown process as far as I see it, as someone who does a lot of mixdowns for other people, as well as mixdowns for, myself and, a lot of other projects. And Logic has always been the one for me for mixdown. I'm very comfortable and very conversant and fluid in a lot of DAWs. So I use the one that's right and appropriate for the job. And for me, when it comes to mixing, it's always been Logic. I really, really enjoy it. I really don't enjoy the mixing process in Ableton. I really enjoy the mixing process in Logic. I really love the composition and sound design and arrangement process in Ableton. I just prefer the mixing in Logic. Simple as that. So it's just how I work. So like I say, I've recorded hours upon hours of mixdowns during NYT's history. And it's all in there in the Mixdown Mastery course. And that's actually going for a tenner right now. That's going for £9.99 for the next couple of days. So I would definitely grab that, because it's an insane deal, that with the amount of knowledge I've dropped in that. That's like years of audio engineering knowledge in one course. And I continue to add to it as well as time goes on. So check that out. We'll talk about that, links and everything at the end. So when we get into the drums, again, it was just a basic essential groove. And again, I've got my kind of template racks and stuff that I use. Like, this is my kick rack. I do love using, like a group of kicks, shall we say, that I'm, fairly enamored with. So if I just play that as, the kick to start off with. It's a big thuddy kick. You can see it's actually here detuned by a couple of semitones, just to make it work with the track a little bit better. I'm not one of those producers that will sit there with a tuner and then try and work out what the key of my kick drum is and to make sure it's in key with the rest of the track. I have actually found very mixed results with that myself over the years. And I tend to go with the final arbiter, which is always my own ears and my own taste. So I know when something works or not. And again, it might not look theoretically correct, but if it sounds good, I genuinely don't care. So I'm one of those people who likes thick, thuddy, dull banging kicks that like really do cut through. And to be honest, a lot of people do comment, especially off the back of like my mixing and mastering and stuff as well, like how big and how good my kicks sound. So it's something that I feel like I've gotten into a sweet spot with. I've got other things, other elements that I might need to use. Say, for example, my favorite transient manager, shall we say, is, Transient Master from Native Instruments. Very old plugin, works absolutely brilliantly. Not using it at all here. Not really necessary. And as you can see, I've got a couple of EQ8s here. One is more for the, overall just cutting of the low end of the kick. And then the other is more for automation. So you'll see that if I hit A on the keyboard again, I'm just going to open that up. And you'll notice that, say, for example, here, as I zoom in again, what you'll see here is, I'll start off a kick with 85 hertz and then drop it. And some of the things I like to do, I like to have different levels. I like to have different levels of, say, bass content. Sometimes, say, for example, I'll go lower than that to make people think that that's actually a full kick that I'm hearing. And then when they get the rest of the kick, it's oh. So it's a false drop, if you will. So you can kind of get 2 or 3 different levels based on the bass content itself. In this case, I like to do it the other way. I like to kind of have high limits, essentially. So I want this to feel like a fairly full kick, and then this one to be really empty with low end, almost no low end in it whatsoever in this sort of part of the equation, for sure. So it makes sense to me, because it's just an easier way of processing it. And again, I love doing these sort of long withdrawals of low end and of bass. So it becomes more dramatic. So you kind of slip into a mini break rather than on, off. So as you can see here, I've not really done a lot of it in the track. I try and keep it moving. There's something that in a track feedback session for last year's birthday, for the 5th birthday, Patrice Baumel said, which is, if you're going to make people stop dancing, you better have a damn good reason. And that's always stuck with me since that session. And that's one of the things I will say about NYT is, sometimes I get as much value out of the sessions as everybody else. So you can now see I'm quite selfish, because I basically want to learn from the people that I want to learn from, and that's why I invite them onto the platform. So, it is the way it is. So again, just a very simple kick, nothing too crazy going on. One of the things you'll see with me is that I don't do a huge amount of compression. I was going to say progression, of course I do. I'm a progressive house producer. But I don't do a lot of compression, because a lot of these sounds are already mastered and they don't need it. So I like to get away with minimal processing where possible. Now, as I zoom out, I'm going to just talk about the grouper, because I do a bit of group processing, and it's not really that complex. Although in this remix, there's something a little different going on. So what I've got here is Supercharger GT, which I'm just going to drag down into here now, as you can see there. And yeah, so I use a compressor not to compress, which is just so typically me. I use the saturation and the character controls on Supercharger GT from Native Instruments, because it just sounds great, and I love putting my whole drum group through it. So if I just play that and then turn that off and back on again, you can just hear how it lifts everything. I love that. Super into it. So I like that across, as you can see here, the entire group of drums. And again, you see a lot of people doing a low end group. You see a lot of people doing, things like, low end buses and kicks separate to the rest of the drums and stuff. Me, I like keeping it all together. And there's a particular reason why this particular drum stem is out of that, because it's part of a transition that we'll look at in a minute. Funny enough, what we're going to do, make our transition. That's funny, isn't it? So that's your kick, right? And again, obviously, making sure it works with the bass. Again, everything's, sitting nicely based on pitches that I'm really happy with. I would add these guys in. So yeah, again, a bit of kickstart on both bass channels. So if I was to just play the bass with the kick only, it's coming through nice and solid. That bit of side chaining on the bass adds a little bit of groove, a little bit of movement, bit of modulation, as well as serving a technical purpose, which is allowing the kick to come through. So no awkward, massive amounts of time and hours me trying to EQ stuff. Like I'm not that type of producer. I try and create tracks with elements that work and sit so well together that I don't need to bother with all of that. It's why I can move incredibly quickly and make a lot of music incredibly, in an incredibly timely manner to a good standard. So yeah, something to bear in mind. If you find yourself constantly EQing sounds, if you find yourself constantly trying to compress stuff and trying to get a bass to fit with the kick and stuff like that, you've probably got a problem with your sound selection. And sound selection is 90% of the battle as far as I'm concerned. Because that also includes not just technical, it also includes taste. So that's how I try and operate. I try and solve problems by not creating problems in the first place with my sound selection. So we've got some more elements from the original which I really want to highlight. So we're going to play this really wicked kind of like almost singing kind of like mod hat. And again, all that's got is a bit of filtering, bit of kickstart. Just gives it that groove. Just works really nicely. And then there's a couple of other and then just those parts So 2 layers of what they've called mod hats, because they've got like a very particular character to them. And then this one here, the glitchy hats. They almost like sing and really cut through the mix. So the combination of them all with the rest is very, very cool. A lot of aggression, a lot of push, a lot of movement. Really, really loved it. And again, I love remixes like this where, I don't feel like a fraud because there's just so much good stuff from the original that it does genuinely feel like a remix. That's the other thing I can't really stand is when I do a remix and there's like, I've used like a hi-hat and maybe like a low tom somewhere. So it's like effectively an original, but I've just used some of the parts of the original. Like this is a proper remix because it's been, again, reimagined in a different way. So in terms of the rest of what we've got going on in the drums, we've also got, again, we'll just break it down one step at a time. And there wasn't even really that many channels, to be honest with you, because I've actually doubled some of these up and soloed them. You'll probably see some of the solo buttons on here in order to render stems so I can then mix the track down Logic. That's something I'll talk about in a moment. So we've got 2 clap channels. And the first one, if I make sure that's playing correctly. Yeah, it's this top clap here. That one. There's like a weird clap that I've used towards the end, which actually is behind my camera, I think. So what I'm going to do is just going to relocate myself to the top corner here. And you can see that now. There you go. There. So it's only 2 layers of clap. I did have like 3 layers playing all at the same time, but just felt like a bit of overkill. It wasn't really necessary. So like this is a clap. The clap that I'm using, this one. That's actually a clap I've made myself. Because I do a lot of sound design work for various companies, including like ADSR. So I layered that myself and processed it myself. So it's in a few of my tracks. And then this weird clap is there to just highlight the end of a section or the end of a phrase at the end of an 8-bar. And it's got this weird stereo stuff going on. So again, just a regular clap. So you get that little pop, just to give it a bit of, you know, variation, essentially. And because I use drum racks quite a lot and I like to layer stuff, it becomes a bit of a pain in the backside when you want to export stems to do a mix down, because then you've kind of got to double up and solo stuff. I would still love Ableton dearly, and I've told him enough times, that you could get a feature when you render the individual tracks that it will give you an individual stem for each cell in a drum rack. That would just be a game changer, so I don't have to go through all this solo and stuff. That being said, who knows? So here as well, there's another, that's the mod hats that we've already looked at. And then I've added 1, 2, 3, 4 of my own hi-hats on top of that. So this first one is actually a really cut off maraca sample from the Native Instruments Machine drum library, which I absolutely love. Been using that for years. That is one of the great sample packs of our time, shall we say. And then this lovely, like, brushy, noisy hat is one of my favourites. I've used this on so many tracks. And it's from an Andre Crom pack that was from 2013. Absolutely amazing. Just gives so much power and so much push, you know? Again, not even EQing that. And I wanted something with a bit more knock to it as well. So I went for a classic, like, 909 closed hi-hat. Proper. Again, another little sort of shaker sound there, just to add a little bit of a layer. And then a lovely 909. And with the 909 stuff, if I was to turn the sustain all the way up there, you can hear it's a lot longer. So I like to take really long enveloped 909 hats, and I like to tune them. I like to pull their decays and ADSR envelopes back so I can make it fit the groove of the track. It's really important, because nothing annoys me more when I hear tracks and I hear these big sloppy 909s over the top and they're sliding over the next set of drums and it's not been, like, correctly manicured, if you know what I mean. So in terms of, like, you know, taking these sounds, again, I love to sculpt these sounds with decays and stuff like that. So we're going to go back to the claps for a second, because Nicholas has actually had a really nice question here, which says, where do you find claps like these? So again, I've made them, the ones that you've heard, or well, the main one that you've heard. And how I did that was that I layered a few different claps. I actually, surprisingly, I found some really good clap samples in a D16 plugin called Punchbox, which is meant to be, like, for kicks. How it's really good. It's if you're into techno, like really good techno, like really hard techno, it's really great kick generator because it's got some incredible tools. But I very surprisingly found some great claps and tom samples and stuff like that as well, because you can use them as clicks over the top of kicks. So I actually found some really nice clap samples in there. And again, like you said, you know, you normally layer, which takes more time. So what I would do, and this actually plays into a bit of a, well, not a masterclass, but it's one of the key principles that we talk about at NYT, which is the separation of the production processes. So that clap that I've played there and I've used on the track is a result of a separate sound design session. So I will have sessions where I will sit here and I just will make sounds. I don't write music. I don't make tracks. I sit and I make the sounds that later will go into the tracks. So I will layer claps, I will, you know, compress them, I'll add distortion, I'll do whatever I need to do in order to make claps that I then later will use during my productions. Because again, like, and I'm not, like, you know, criticizing anybody else's process. I really don't like it when I've got 3 like kick layers and, you know, a couple of different claps that are like over the top of each other, and I've got to manage that process at the same time as write, arrange, compose, and try and execute on the track. They're processes for me that I prefer to do before I get into the production phase of a track or a remix. It's a bit like expecting a painter to mix the colours of his paint at the same time as he's putting it on the canvas. Like, you won't get that. Like, the painter will, you know, mix those colours on his palette to make sure that they're right before he commits the paint to the canvas. So that's like the analogy that I always use where that's concerned. So definitely the likes of Punchbox, and again, don't be afraid of separating time out away from the process of writing music in order to design sounds that are unique to you. That is what I would say. So again, as I say, and the same thing applies to the claps as well, about tuning and tightening up the ADSR envelopes. You know, I like to take the drum samples, in this case a 909, and I like to put it in classic mode, which gives me the ADSR, and then again I can tighten it, because again, if you think about it, the faster the track is, the less space there is between the beats, the shorter ideally your hi-hat and certain samples are going to be, because then you can use what little space you do have, because again the time is contracting between the beats as the tempo goes up. So you can tune these sounds to whatever tempo is basically what I would say. So yeah, just these lovely, again, if you listen to those hats back, they all have, like, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, like there's 5 layers to it, but they all have their own space. They all have their own tone, texture, timbre, and they work really, really well together. I've selected them very, very mindfully in order to make sure that they all have their frequency space, they all have their time space. And, you know, again, I like them to have a natural stereo width as well. I don't really do stuff that you see a lot of producers do where, you know, they do a lot of harsh zone stuff with like shakers and stuff, and you know, it's great and it works, but I tend to try and keep things like really, really effective and really simple, and then move fast and break stuff. Speaking of which, just a nice simple ride, and low as well. When I want to go more techno, more banging, more in your face, I love low rides. I love detuning rides to, like, in this case it's 6 semitones down, so that's quite the detune, but because you've got the other mod hats in that frequency area, I can make a really dull, aggressive ride that sits underneath that and just grunts away and just pumps and, you know, really, really does the trick. So yeah, so that's one element to it. A couple of incidental sounds, which we'll get to in the breakdown. I've actually like put a couple of like bass drop type sounds in there as well, which you'll thoroughly enjoy. And then like a little perk loop that I've found somewhere. Don't ask me. You know, that's got a bit of a shakery kind of vibe to it, with a bit of almost like a little bit of flange to it. And you can see, just going with the quality of the sound, really happy with that sound. A little bit of side chaining, a little bit of filtering. That's about it. And then actually my other shaker, or my other kind of like 16th note sound in this track, is just pure white noise. This rack that I made is literally like the oldest thing on the face of the earth that I use, probably apart from Kickstart one. And it's just white noise generated by Operator. And all it is just tonally, you know, shifted, using the filters in order to get that lovely, like, rattly 16th note kind of vibe. And again, I can use the time control there as well to... And that's something that I could have done and rode with an automated function. Like, say, for example, like I could map it to a macro, use it on the APC40, automate it using the push 2. But there was so much good stuff going on and there's so much movement that I didn't really see the point. So a lot of the time, It's not doing something for the sake of doing it because you can. It's recognizing that, yeah, I could do some modulations of white noise here and it could add something to the track, but it might be at the expense of other elements because, again, there's quite a lot of layers here, as you can see, you know, and it's not like incredibly busy, but it's busy enough, and everything's covering a good amount of ground. And with the intensity of the parts and everything else, I don't really need to add to that because there is such a thing as like what we would call in England like over-egging it. It's, you know, over-egging the pudding, it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, it's jumping the shark, you know, it's all those little terms I'd like to say, like, you've pushed it a little bit too far. You know, I personally think really good dance music is an exercise in restraint. I mean, you'd be surprised listening to this because this is about as unrestrained as I get. But, you know, there are limits and you've got to just keep it doing its thing. So for me, it was more about just having another nice little shakery white noise pattern. And yeah, I could do other stuff like, you know, adding the vocoder, that trick, and, you know, putting a formant on it, and then like some harsh zone stuff, and just didn't see the point, quite frankly. It was rocking exactly where I wanted it to be. And again, you put the whole thing together. Here's the whole drum mix on its own. And again, right up there. Just giving it a nice solid groove. But then, quite hasty switch. And you'll hear something go on in a moment that you'll find quite interesting, I think. Because there's some other automations here on the drum group. And then we're into the electro section. So these are just some really, really lovely loops that I found, which I just thought really worked really, really well. They, you know, that sharp, like really sharp left turn in this track really works well. And that weird transition. So we're going to talk about that now because there's a couple of things going on there that I wanted to have happen. So if we see that, I've basically got transient, oh sorry, not transit, it's transit from Baby Audio. Love this thing. Preset's called Octave Stutter. And I really, really love this. I really deeply love it. And what I've got, if we look at the map for the macro control, I've got the effect amount and the global mix already on there. And it's actually mapped to the same macro. So when I turn this, it turns both. So I do have a portal on there as well. And you'll see that move as well. So you can see that. I wanted to have like a different kind of transition. Like I really love it when like the drums disappear in like a cloudy haze of granular weirdness. You know, rather than like just doing some standard thing where it's like, yeah, pick the bass up, there you go. You know, it's just doing something that just puts a slightly different edge on it. It makes things sound a little bit unpredictable. It's like, okay, I don't know where the hell this is going, but this is really cool. Like, that's the type of thing that I'm going for with that. And then with Portal, it was another element that I found here. Like, it's called Such a Drag. And like, say, for example, if I was to just like play that on its own, if I turn that transit off, it's just got that little weird kind of like extra granular flavor. Portal's one of my favorites. And again, just it was the combination, the specific combination of how the Baby Audio transit was working and how the output of that sounded within Portal. Like this is the stuff that I really love to do. I love to sit and like play around with this and create like happy accidents and take advantage of them and try and like get off the grid a little bit and then be able to control it in such a way where I've got multiple parameters mapped to one macro, or I can automate several macros at the same time to create an interesting movement into the next section that you're just not expecting at all. So if you play that alongside the rest of the track, then we get into this electro section here. And you know, I had lined up all sorts of stuff like this. You know, I can do little things with like beat repeat. Again, another one of my favourite plugins. And you know, I've got another instance of Portal on this. And this is why it's outside the drum group, because I've got a phaser flanger, I've got Portal, I was playing around with beat repeats, you know, there's all sorts of stuff going on. So this drum grain destroyer preset is fantastic. If I was to turn the phase flange off, you'll hear it. And I just love the gnarliness of it in the background. If I just play the drums and that's about it. And again, if I turn that echo off, it's just a classic old school, you know, I'm expecting like Africa Bambaataa to turn up at any moment, you know? And there's two different loops and I've chopped them and I've rearranged them in order to do something interesting. So again, with the Portal on. And again with the echo on as well, on Return B. And what I've done with the Return B is I've got high amounts of feedback and very, very low delay time. So that's like pretty much still within the back end of the harsh zone. You can just about hear them as discrete sounds. And again, a high level of feedback, it just gives that kind of like weird kind of vibe. And again, like what you can see here on the Ableton Echo is that I've rolled off 153 hertz because again, a delay like that on the low end of like very boomy loops like this can like really crap out the low end. So again, I wanted it to be very apparent on things like the hi-hats and the rim shots and snares and stuff like that as well. So again, that's what gives it that like really interesting edge. And that with the Portal just gives it this kind of growling kind of vibe. And then you add I was gonna say the flazer. Is that like I might just call it that from now on. Hey, have you heard this with a flazer on it? What's a flazer? It's a phaser and flanger at the same time. It's a phalange. Anyway, stop it, Paul. You've got that lovely. That was a lot of dialing in. I'm going to be honest with you, because like flanges can be like so ridiculous, and you can go so over the top with them so quickly. But it just gives you this lovely movement. And so a couple of rounds of that, I think it's like, 16 bars of that. And it shifts into this other. So if we play that loop on its own. It's got that little like metallic little tap. Like you're tapping on the end of like a, I don't know, a trash can or like a hand pan or something. And just taking a different loop and then putting the same effects on it with a different context just works really nicely. And it helps sort of further transition to where we're getting to in the break. So yeah. Because at this section, if I was to, let it ride a bit. We're getting into the acid now. So we're getting into like acid electro. But at the same time, you've got through this top stem here, which is all the main synths stemmed. So this is where like I kind of, not cheated, but I kind of made life easy for myself because there's so much good stuff going on. So I'm going to rewind and sort of go through this. So you can hear that just high pass filter, that low pass filter just coming in. I'll just take that off. And I've actually kind of like re-edited and re-chopped it to kind of like get it into the right ballpark. And again, you can hear the little bits of reverb I've put on there to kind of give a bit of tension. Helps with that edit point as well. And then into your electro section. And you get that lovely twisting. Transitions into the other loop where you can hear this, like, honestly, like this was the thing that got me. I'm just gonna let this play out because I'm still getting all over body goosebumps with this just playing in now. I mean, this was the thing in the original that made me go, Jesus Christ, I'm signing this. I mean, yeah, have some of that. Insane. It's like the raw emotion in that is just nuts. I still float off. I was just floating away there. I was back at balance in Croatia. Like, you can't do anything else but just let that do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, half the battle with music production is knowing when to get out of the way. And when the parts are so good, all you have to do here is just frame them. That's literally all I've done here. I've found interesting ways in and out of stuff in order to keep people guessing as to what's going to happen. Because if you listen to the original, like the full original is incredible. Like, it sounds like if like the Plump DJs were making tracks in, like, you know, the town out of Stranger Things in the 80s. Like, it's absolutely wild. It's like 4 tracks in one, you know? So it's got so much to it. It's 80s, it's synthwave, it's electro, it's breaks, it's progressive, it's everything, you know? Yeah, and yeah, there's maybe a little bit of that going on there, Mr. Brown Alliance. Again, you'd have to ask Dave that, because Dave's done a really good reel on his Instagram. Go and give him a follow. Born of Blades Music. He did a little breakdown of how he made the track. So yeah, really, really cool. Like, just that lovely little bit of gating going on and stuff like that. I believe he used the Sonic Academy synth. Oh God, what's it called? I'm gonna have to look it up now. Why is my brain failing me today on a live stream? I don't know. Where are we? Sonic Alive. I've got this. Sonic Academy. Anna. That's the one. Anna 2, I believe it or not. I believe it is. So yeah, at that point, it's like, I'm just going to let Dave take the center stage. There you go. Like I mentioned before, though, I did add some elements. So I'm going to talk about the build and the drop here. So if we listen to that whole breakdown now. Let me just get that right. And again, the acid is from the original as well. I mean, listen to that. No processing. So at this point, I'm just putting loops over the original. And then big bass drop from these guys. I hit them again. Just to give it that extra push, you know. All there is on it, a little bit of reverb. Our accelerator reverb, which is a bit of a legendary rack, which you can get for free from our website, transition.studio. And then this is still the same stem, this is still the same audio file. So there, I'm just following it and just saying, right, okay, right, what are we gonna do here? Right, big fucking snare roll. And then just a stop at the end there. And then just drop it as hard as you possibly can. Simple as that. Stripped back, no rides or, you know, again, the white noise and stuff. Just pull something back to give you somewhere to go after the drop. And then, you know, you've got the transitional effect. And again, like, there's actually, like, you know, transitional effects and whooshes and stuff that I've used from the original as well. But I've also used just a very simple white noise that I built a long time ago in Silent that I just use for, you know, the little frisson that you need, that little flash, that little spray of white noise you need right at the drop. And that's it. And then the acid is just going crazy. We're in full Josh Wink mode. I mean, when you get parts this good, it's just like, just put your stuff underneath it. Just put your stuff underneath it, let it get on with it. Simple as that. But, you know, this is literally me trying to put such a fine spotlight on just incredible levels of production from Dave. It's been a real honour developing him as an artist, as part of the community. And honestly, you know, we've got so many other producers who are just like him, who are so talented that, you know, it became a no-brainer for me to start a record label. It became a no-brainer to do what we do. And, you know, we're trying to do some really, really high-level stuff with NYT. We really, really are. So in terms of that, you know, it's not complicated. Like, there's not a lot of stuff going on here. You know, again, I've got some really nice rises and stuff that I've chopped from, again, the original stems just to make it work. You know? Well. I'm taking stuff like that and like reversing and just making sure they sit in the right moments for like this mini break towards the end. And in this section towards the end, I just wanted it to have like a groove. Just let it do its thing. The acid's still bubbling. It's got a bounce to it. Works really well with the drums. So again, it's respecting the original. And, you know, I could have split those acid stems into all the individual parts that Dave gave me, used the original layers. You know, I could have stripped that synth summed group with all the amazing sort of like, you know, expander style synths in there in the break. Could have used all the individual layers. There's no need. They sound great the way they are. So go with it and go for maximum impact. Don't overcomplicate the process. Just go with what's sounding good, not what technically you feel like you should do. There's a place for technique, that absolutely is. Don't get me wrong, I'm one of the most technical producers out there. But trust me, on the dance floor, if it's going off, nobody cares about your technique. As long as there's an impact, as long as the storytelling's right, that's what it's all about. So that's the remix. It's not too complicated at all. So where it gets interesting is that I've then output a set of stems, and this is where we flip over into Logic. So this might actually, you know, throw a few people off because, yeah, I mixed it in Logic. And you can see I've brought all the stems in. I've done some additional, I've actually rebuilt the transition that you heard from Baby Audio and Portal, and then mixed it in Logic and also mastered it as well. So again, I'm not going to go into this a lot because we've got a full course on mixing on the platform. And, you know, I basically, just to give you a very nice overview, I use Slate Digital, virtual mix rack, virtual channels on everything. I'm a big fan of Trackspacer. I think it works absolutely brilliantly. Using it here on, you know, certain tracks in order to, and again with the side chain as well, I'm making sure that things are, you know, staying out of the way of the bass and stuff like that. I love that with Trackspacer, really, really into it. Again, I've added a little bit extra into like the acid with a little bit of decapitator here. So I'm just further augmenting the sound, getting it exactly where I want it to be. And again, I've, you know, used, you know, transit and everything else. Like I've just made sure everything's like sitting exactly where I want it to be. Everything's doing exactly what I need it to. And again, this is one of the reasons why I love Logic for mixing, that mixer section, you know, especially now in 11.2 with the long faders, the long throw faders. It feels like an analog mixing board to me. I don't have to sit there and look at graphical stuff the whole time. I'm literally just using my ears. Like, this is my preferred way of mixing. So it's less about whether or not it's the sound engine or whether or not it's about the, you know, oh, Ableton and Logic sound different and all that nonsense. It just comes down to the workflow for me. And the workflow for Logic for me, mixing wise, just makes so much more sense to me. For production, as you can see, I do the production in Ableton, but I do the mixing in Logic. And what I've always said to people is, when you start to do this, you start to understand how much of an opportunity that you have. You have an opportunity to tell the story again in post-production, because we've just moved from the production phase into the post-production phase. A lot of people mix as they go. I've never considered that mixing, as far as I'm concerned. Because again, I'm a mix engineer. So people send me stems, and I mix their tracks, and I send it back to them. That's a service that's available, by the way. If you need it, let me know. But why would I not do that for myself? Like, why would I mix as I go for myself and then mix other people's stuff? That doesn't make sense to me. So it takes a little bit more time. But for me, I think the end product is way higher. Way, way higher. And again, I do this hybrid approach where I also master and mix at the same time because I've got full control of everything. It just makes it makes complete sense to me. And again, you know, I could go through the mastering stuff. We've got a mastering course. You know, we've got everything you need over at transition.studio. Put the www beforehand because it gets a bit squiffy with the URL. So yeah, it's all very cool. It's all very, very cool. And the end result is what you can hear that has come out today. It's come out today. It's on Beatport. We're really, really proud of it. Just going to run back to a screen share very, very quickly, because there's a few things that I want to show before we finish off for the evening. So we share that. There we go. Head over to Beatport. Snafu by Born of Blades. The original is absolutely sensational. Guy Barone's remix is absolutely out of this world. The promo support for that has been bonkers. Think of a progressive house DJ. They're probably playing it. Hernan Catano put it on his Balance podcast pre the festival. Thanks very much, as always, to El Maestro for the incredible support of the label, of what we do, of myself. Like, I'm so grateful to Hernan, for everything he's done for me, especially in the last 18 months or so. Thank you to Guy for just being such an incredible human being and an amazing artist and somebody I absolutely love working with on many, many different things. He's done this remix. He did a masterclass for us this year. He did a track feedback session. He's absolutely been the MVP of of NYT in 2025, myself included, if I'm being completely honest. And obviously, I was never going to pass up the opportunity to remix a track like that. So, it sits, for me, my remix, I'm very, very proud of it. And it sits next to some of my best stuff. So, yeah, it's well worth picking up. Release date was today. Tried to put a bit more of a focus on it by, doing a Monday release rather than last Friday. We've also got Guy's remix premiered in full over on Virtua, which is Proton Radio's SoundCloud premiere account. So if you're not following that, give that a follow. It's also in their Spotify playlist as well, which will, obviously have all the best stuff from Proton Distribution. Big shout out to the boys and girls at Proton Distribution. Big fans of theirs. We use them for the label. Love them. Been friends with the Proton guys for over 20 years. And on top of that, we've got premieres coming of both of the other tracks from When We Dip and and Decoded for the original. My remix in full, which you've obviously heard quite a bit tonight, is going to be available over on SoundCloud to listen to on When We Dip. And then obviously you can buy it from Beatport. So please support the release. That would be absolutely fantastic. We're 15 releases deep. We've got a lot of really good music coming. We've got an ADE sampler coming in the next few weeks to coincide with that. So it's going to be fun. That's our third ADE sampler. So we're into year 3 of the label. Very, very exciting. Like I mentioned before as well, we are, for the next day and 3 hours, 42 minutes and 10 seconds, we are half price on all artist development programs. And as you can see, you've got Holt there. We've worked with Tim Green. We've had Christoph on the platform. We've helped artists like Four Candles and Masano and many, many others to get to where they want to be in this industry. This is what we love to do. We love to help people fulfill their potential. We really, really do. It's the honor and the privilege of my lifetime to do this with people. It's an absolutely wonderful thing we do. I'm so, so proud of it. And we're into year 7 now, believe it or not. So as I say, it's half price, 240 quid for the year. Break that down. It's like, what, £24 a month? Less than about 20 quid a month. It's nothing. And you can pay every 6 months if you want as well, 120. And you get locked into that rate for life. So why not? Why not take the plunge? Because another thing we're doing, we're starting it on Wednesday. Synth Mastery Situm 2. 8 weeks of live classes. Absolutely going to be rocking. Like it says here, it's going to be over 10 hours of video. Because the classes are going to be long. I've already shot a lot of bonus content for it. And yeah, absolutely wonderful. It's going to be fun. And again, live classes as well. So it's not just stuff that you've got to sit and passively just inhale. It's going to be available on the website post, but you're going to be able to be, if you're an NYT AAA member, you're going to be able to be in on the sessions. You're going to be able to answer questions. You're going to be able to interact. And it's a much, much better way of learning. I love teaching in live fire environments. I love teaching live because it's just the most interesting, the best way to do it. So why not? So there you go. So Mr. Brown Alliance is asking, why should I sign up for the year membership? Well, why shouldn't you? You get all the support you need. You get incredible track feedback. You get the ability to release on the label. You get an incredible community full of people. You get 20 plus courses that will support you through everything from, social media, branding strategy, artist look, feel, the whole 9 yards, right the way through to sound design, mixing, mastering, everything you need. Absolutely everything you need. One-to-one training, mix down and mastering services, help with getting stuff signed to other labels as well. It's basically everything you need. A 360 for a modern electronic music producer. So the question is, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you sign up? Especially when it's half price, because it's going to go up to £480 for the year from, Wednesday. So yeah, get yourselves in the last couple of days. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun time, and trust me, we've got some amazing stuff coming and amazing new music coming on the label, and also just new stuff coming all the time. So yeah, and exactly, Dennis, that's why you'd sign up for the year, because you're there. I mean, of course. I mean, First Tech himself is there. One of our great success stories, by the way. And again, not just in progressive, not just in melodic techno, we're across, exactly, Duncan. We're across, organic house, deep house, funky stuff, like jazzy stuff like Dennis makes, across the board. We are, as the Kick Doctor himself says, genre fluid. So, you get the support you need no matter what genre you pick and whatever your poison is. So yeah, and it's just a fun time. It's just a load of nerds hanging out together, supporting each other. What's not to love? I mean, I'm the chief nerd, so I would say that. So anyway, guys, it's been phenomenal. Yeah, Mr. Brown Alliance, you're more than welcome to drop in. And actually, if you look in the video description, I offer free consultancy calls as well. So if you're not sure if it's the fit, you can book in for a little 15, 20-minute chat with me, and I can explain it to you in a bit more depth. Feel free. Plenty of people have. I've got a couple of busy days coming up with people getting onboarded. So yeah, we're growing. And that's the whole idea. We want to do this music industry, this electronic music industry, the right way. Because these days, boy, oh boy, is there a lot of fakeness? Is there a lot of inauthenticity? We've just got to try and move the needle even 1 degree in the direction back towards people who are authentic, artists who are incredibly talented and are in it for the right reasons. Mason James asks a fantastic question. If you sign up for the 6 months, does it stay at that price when you auto-renew? It absolutely does. So we're also a platform where we don't like to, excuse the English colloquialism, we don't like to take the piss. And what we like to do is, if you're on a 50%, we let you keep that rate for the life of your membership. So we're not going to gazump you. We're not going to, after 6 months it's going to have to go up, and all that stuff. Don't need to do that at all, mate. Don't need to do that whatsoever. So yeah, we try and be fair. We try and be affordable for people as well, because this music game is not only, long-winded and difficult and technical, it's also expensive. And let's be honest, everything's expensive these days. So we try and keep it as reasonable as humanly possible. So yeah, if you want to have a chat to me, the link is in the description below for logging in to booking a call with me. I'm available Tuesdays and Thursdays to do those types of consultancy calls. More than happy to. Drop me a line, paul@transition.studio. Please feel free. Please feel free. At 5 years, need help for that little push. Money is tight. Caring for an elderly parent. Definitely empathise with you on that one, mate. Definitely hear you struggle on it. And, mate, we've got loads of people who are in similar positions to you, who are doing incredible things with the time and the money that they have, with the support of what we do. So we're here to help people. We're here to support people. We're here to help people, make their transition into the life and music that they want to lead. And we've got a great track record of doing that for the likes of Four Candles, Masano, and I could rack off so many other names that we've worked with as well. So yeah, please feel free to get in touch. Absolute honour, a privilege and a pleasure. Wonderful as always to share a little bit of internet time with you. And yeah, looking forward to starting Sidham 2 Mastery on Wednesday, 7 o'clock UK time for members only. So, let's go for it. All right, good people. Support the release. As I've seen a few people say, smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed, because we do lives like this every so often, and I'll be putting stuff up and, you know, little clips of other stuff. So it's going to get interesting with content, stuff that we're going to give away for free. And look, we're always here to help. Much love, guys. Take it easy. Have a lovely night or a lovely day, wherever you are in the world. Take it easy. Much love.